The Philadelphia 76ers are trailing the New York Knicks 3-1 in the series, and there's some conversation going on around the timeline that I just will not stand for. Now, I get the frustration. Believe me, I'm right there with you. But all I'm hearing is trade Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris sucks, Daryl Morey's a failure, Tyrese Maxey's not ready, and everybody just has to pump the brakes a little bit. And there's two parts of this that I want to break down. Number one, we have to stop with the trade Joel Embiid stuff. And for starters, this conversation is entirely too premature, as there is still basketball to be played in this, and that is the second part that I need to get to. But for starters, we don't need conversations like this flying out of the woodwork, such as this idiotic take saying it's time to trade Joel Embiid for a haul, build around Maxey, and hope the haul gets results in a bunch of good draft picks, use on players who can win you a championship. It's not going to happen with Embiid. Process over. Now, I want to take that in a couple different parts. For starters, for those of you who do think it's time to give up on the quite valuable, most valuable player in the entire NBA, how was it watching without him this year? And if you guys forget, let me pull up just real quick the record with Joel Embiid this season, 31-8. The record without him, 16-27. Oh yeah, and if that wasn't familiar enough for you guys to remember, how has this series gone? Because if you ask me, it's been a little bit of a different story when Joel Embiid's on the court and when he's not. And to dive into that specifically, that Joel Embiid, the most recent loss was the 11th postseason loss of his career, in which he finished with a positive plus-minus. It has happened in all three losses in this Sixers-Knicks series, and the Sixers are now a plus 34 with Joel Embiid in 161 minutes on the floor, and a minus 37 without him in the 31 minutes in the series. If you take Joel Embiid off this roster, this Sixers team is in the lottery. And to take it a step farther, you take this player and put him on any of the 32 teams in the NBA, and they're a borderline championship contender. You put Joel Embiid on the Detroit Pistons right now, they're a 45-plus win team. There's no doubt about that. That's how much one player matters in the NBA, and that's why it's so important to maximize and hold on to that quality of guy when you do have him. And that's where I don't want the conversation to get lost. Is Joel Embiid is one of those guys that in the short list of superstars, no matter how short you want to cut it, he's on it. He's that real deal impactful, and we see it on an every night basis. Now, there's a couple different conversations here with the Joel Embiid trade piece, and I'm going to break down why every aspect of them are completely idiotic. For starters, when you do a trade in the NBA, for the same reason that I just mentioned why one player is so important, you're not upgrading from a talent standpoint from Joel Embiid. You can maybe handpick, if you want to argue, Nikola Jokic and Giannis Antetokounmpo, maybe as upgrades from a talent standpoint. And you know what? There's zero chance either the Nuggets or the Bucks do that deal, that they're not shipping off their franchise centerpiece. So every player from that point down is a step down. And even if you want to throw in the conversation of the younger up-and-coming guys, there is still not going to be movement from the other side of things, that it takes two to tango, and then that's not going to be the outlook. That the Timberwolves aren't going to pick up the phone if you want Anthony Edwards. The Spurs aren't going to pick up the phone if you want Victor Wembanyama for Joel Embiid. And I've also seen the tweets, got the messages, people saying, we got to trade Joel Embiid before people catch up to the injury issues. Well, bad news, guys. The cat's out of the bag on that one. That is pretty well known across all NBA circles here, and that's the reason we're even having these conversations in the first place. That this version of Joel Embiid, that has quite clearly been the best player in the series, still head and shoulders above Jalen Brunson through the 4-game sample size. He's been the most elite player on the floor, and he's maybe 60% of himself. But he still can't jump for rebounds, and he's still been the most dominant player, has scored 50 points, has elevated the Sixers team, been a better defensive player than any player on the Knicks. That's the dude that's leading the franchise, and that's what we should be grateful for. Now, the second part of this, and this is what is pointed out in this initial tweet here, and I don't mean to single whoever this dude is out. This was just the first one I saw when I Googled the Joel Embiid trade, because I've seen it flurrying around all day. So to take it in the direction that he took, that the other route for a trade is for a large sample size of picks and young players. Now, does that guarantee you a championship? Does that bring you closer? And with the patience already so worn thin from Sixers fans, does that put you on par to actually winning a championship? It does not. And have we seen this organization's track record for having a good feel for selecting young players? That Tyrese Maxey is 1 in a million. One in the Jahlil Okafors, the Nerlens Noels, the guys that have not panned out, the Dario Saric's of the world. The amount of first-round picks, Markelle Fultz, it goes on and on for the amount of first-round picks and guys that did not pan out, that if any single one of those was a hit, it's a different story right now. And that is the story of this Sixers team, is there's a lot that has not panned out. But to bring it back to that conversation as a whole, are you sold that Tyrese Maxey's ready to be a 1A, that he's ready to have this franchise built around him? And I don't want to diminish what Tyrese Maxey has done. That while I'm a bit unsatisfied with his kind of, I don't want to say effort level. His understanding of his role is a better way to put it. That my biggest critique of Tyrese is he still doesn't have that it's my turn to go get a bucket mentality. And I think it still has not clicked in his head how important he is to the Sixers team, how much they need him to just deliver from a standpoint of putting points in the basket, taking over for possessions, being that alpha dog. That's the steps that we need to see that he has not taken so far. And are you optimistic that that happens when I guess you're forcing him into it? There's a world where that happens. But then again, we're seeing these shortcomings, and you're not going to win with this version of Tyrese Maxey as your 1A. Now, is he 23 years old, only going to get better? Absolutely. All these things are true. But that's only more the reason why I think you keep him tied to Joel Embiid, who is in more in this win now period. That the prime of Tyrese Maxey is towards the tail end of Joel Embiid. We are on the downside of Joel Embiid. There's no doubt about that. But I do believe that a lot of these shortcomings, the injuries, all these things you want to bring up, a lot of those go away if you can add another player to take some responsibility, some usage rate, just some offensive load off of his plate. Those are things that are fair assessments. Those are things that I will hear out the argument. I can hear the complaints about the treatment from the medical staff, the way that he's able to play as often as he is, that there straight up should be a plan, a concrete plan put in place from game one to not allow this guy to try to get to that 65-game limit. That I'm personally leading the charge. I only want Joel Embiid to play home games next year because I don't care about the MVP. I only want this guy healthy for playoffs. But that does bring me back to this full force, that we are still in playoffs, that despite what you may have read, despite what you may have seen, there is still basketball to be played in this series, that the Sixers are trailing 3-1 against the New York Knicks. They have not been eliminated by the New York Knicks. And this is such the case that is it perfect? Is it likely that they can crawl their way back? Probably not. But is it possible? Absolutely. And to dive into the track record specifically, that entering this NBA postseason, there have been 281 previous playoff series that have gone to 3-1. The team on the wrong side of that mark has rallied to win 3 straight games and win the series just 13 times. That's 4.6% of the times that has occurred. Now, is this a great promising look? No. But is it possible? Absolutely. And the reason that I still have some sort of optimism in this regard is because the Sixers are still the better team than the New York Knicks. And I will say that with my chest, regardless of what you want to say in the comments, that we are quite literally a screwed call from the referee talking about this being a 2-2 series heading back to New York in which the Sixers had accomplished their goal. That we're feeling pretty good about the outlook from here. And it has been coin flip games, game in and game out. Now, again, that doesn't increase my optimism that they can win 3 straight. And frankly, if you pin me right down and ask, I don't think it happens. But I'm not saying there's a 0% chance. And the other factor that I don't want to get lost in translation here, as Philadelphia melts into the world of trade Joel Embiid, this season was a disaster, that this season has been a gap year since the very start. That don't forget that James Harden was a part of this roster when this year kicked off. That PJ Tucker started multiple games for the Sixers this season. That was a part of this year. And all the tactical moves that Daryl Morey was hell-bent on doing, the moves that he did get done, the trades that he did make, those all came with a little asterisk in the game plan that those were guys on one-year deal. That even leading into this season, the focus was on keeping as much flexibility in cap space, in draft picks, and potential trade assets for this summer. That this is the first time in the Daryl Morey era where he's not undoing past mistakes. He's not dealing with this Ben Simmons contract and the Ben Simmons being unhappy. He's not dealing with this Tobias Harris highway robbery of a contract that he's been on for the past 5 seasons. He's not dealing with James Harden throwing a hissy fit, calling him a liar in clubs, none of these things. Daryl Morey just has to build a basketball team around Joel Embiid, and for Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey, this is the first time that a roster can purely be built around him. That there's no Ben Simmons that you have to bring in an Al Horford for. There's no PJ Tucker that you got to bring in for James Harden. It's whatever Joel Embiid wants, and that is the first time that you can unlock him as a player. That I think you decrease the chances of him getting hurt. You increase the chances of him getting ready for the playoffs by bringing in guys that can take a load off his shoulders. You get a power forward not named Tobias Harris who chases rebounds like he's afraid to break his nail. You get him a power forward who's ready to go up and get some boards. All of a sudden, we're not complaining about Josh Hart out hustling this team. You want to get a guy that is capable of scoring 25 a night, more cut from the Paul George mold rather than a Tobias Harris. All of a sudden, it's a different story and different outlook for this team. So the point being that this summer, there's still a bright future for the Sixers. That despite what a nightmare situation it seems, you can't find 5 teams that are in a better long-term spot than the Sixers team right now. I challenge you to find that. They're still in the driver's seat of having a true MVP candidate player, one of the top 3 players in the entire league. They still have an up-and-coming star, a guy who is still further accelerating and taking these rapid-fire steps to an all-star caliber player, to an all-NBA caliber player. Who knows how high Tyrese Maxey's ceiling is? He's just 23 years old. We're still at the very beginning of that. And then it's blank space surrounding that you can truly find guys to maximize their abilities in a way that this Sixers organization has continually failed in years past. But in the short term, we still got to check rock and play some basketball. So I don't want to hear the whining. I don't want to hear the giving up. I don't care about the Knicks taking over the arena at the Wells Fargo Center. That there's still basketball to be played this year. So stop it with the trade Joel Embiid takes, and we will have a larger, more in-depth conversation about building around him when it does get to that offseason point. But we're not there yet. So everybody pump the brakes. Everybody relax. And let's go check rock and win Game 5. Appreciate you guys for tuning into this video. Make sure you are dropping a subscribe. I want to hear your comments. Get it off your chest, whether you're pissed at me for bringing this up, whether you think I'm stupid for my Joel Embiid takes, or you do hear me, because I am frustrated by the timeline, and I will be talking more in depth about that moving forward. Regardless, I'm appreciative of you guys for tuning in, regardless of your opinion there. Make sure you're smashing that like button as well. Appreciate each and every one of you, and talk next time right here on Sixers Digest.